Hey, welcome to Dollar Views. I'm Brian Gillis.
And I'm Stephen Maltmanex.
We're just a couple of Long Beach State film grads with a lifelong passion for cinema trying to put our money where our mouths are.
And we decided to make our BAs mean something by offering our spoiler-free take on the latest film releases.
Plus, any other media we've ingested over the past week.
Whether that's the latest buzzworthy show,
An album that's been on constant rotation,
that indie darling no one can shut up about,
a cute romantic comedy,
or the latest Michael Bay masterpiece.
we go over it all. $1 at a time.
Is the haze working for you? Not loving it, but we're getting pieces of stuff that don't have haze.
Was it an easy delivery, that one?
Yes, it's very easy.
You got me. Is it okay if I film you? Mom?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first nonfiction, or rather, I don't even know the right term, but let's just say documentary production that we've done on any of our varied shows.
No. This film is not yet rated, which was
Oh, that's
also
right.
shot by this director slash editor slash. I'm blanking out on the name too, which I should know this.
No, Kristen Johnson wasn't on that. She was on...
No, it's on an IMDb credit.
Really?
Yeah, she's
Cool.
one of the people that shot it.
To call this a documentary is not even accurate either, because it's like a petri dish, or better yet, like an appetizer platter of documentaries.
It's really like the slice of life of documentaries in a way, or in varied ways. Like I don't know. My experience watching this movie was one of like I was sort of just wondering what the hell was the point at the beginning, because like at first it's all these scattered little vignettes where you see stuff in Bosnia, and she's having like basic filmmaking discussions and trying to figure out what shots they want to get, what goals they want. There's like little talks of having people in it and going, no, that's public domain, that's fine. Then you get random stuff of like, just a shot of landing in Queens in New York, and then there's just a day where she's hanging out with French deconstructionist Jacques Derrida, and I'm just thinking like, what did someone take, like, there's this app called 1 Second a Day. It's like, is this what that is? Is this that movie version of that, or someone just compiling their Instagram diary and trying to form a memoir out of that? But you know what, the themes become clear as it goes along, and you do see at least something in it, but it's weird to describe the experience, because it was one where I was wondering, what the hell is the point of this? Is this going to be some pretentious shit for 100 minutes? But then, no, it does come together into something meaningful. So it's weird to categorize.
Let me
it.
rephrase that. It's not our first nonfiction entry. However, it is our first art cinema entry.
Well, what you can call this, actually, rather than documentary, and it's based on how she describes it with the note at the beginning, is that this is a cinematic memoir.
That's fair.
And it's definitely, there's stuff here where you do see some themes coming together, but yeah, there's also a lot of stuff here where I'm just like, yeah, this is probably someone's personal experiences being shown on film, where they have, I don't know, like a thing that stuck with me when I'm watching this is when they're showing the stuff in Jasper, Texas, she just includes a moment where a guy's bringing a bunch of evidence and stuff, and then he just goes like, oh, I have a cup in my mouth. Maybe that was just a little vignette that meant something more to her than it will for the audience. But yeah, it definitely does feel like someone's sort of cinematic diary that they're sharing, and it's going to have a different meaning for them than it will with the audience. But there's definitely enough here where you can at least get something out of it.
It's just an interesting document on the whole, because it's by no stretch of the imagination an actual film, in the same way that narratives, they share a certain commonality with fiction, in that there's a director and they have something in mind, they have a story, perhaps like a conversation they want to exchange, they want to get this message from their head onto the camera, onto the screen, and into the viewers' minds. Whereas this is just, oh, look, I was here and I was there and I was filming this and I was filming that, and this is the stuff that didn't make it, or maybe only parts of it made it into that feature, and yet I have all this B-roll, I have this extra footage, and I want to do something with it. And let me see if I can turn it into a mirror for my life and these adventures that I've had over the last 25 years or so. And it shows in terms of the digital camera work here, where You can clearly tell some of the stuff that's shot over the last year or two because it's clearly in 2 or 4K, and
Yeah.
then
And
you
there's
have
stuff in
stuff
like the 4:3 ratio that's
yeah,
clearly from
like it's like VHS or
12
mini
years ago
DV or
Yeah.
something like
The
that.
stuff in
Where
Jasper, Texas.
yeah, or even worse than that. Like it's real fitting too, without getting into it, because I'm gonna try my best not to spoil anything. But going into it, I mean, think she's best known, Kristen Johnson, maybe not her name, but the work that she has done that is best known is Citizen 4, and you get one little thing that means absolutely nothing that maybe in the grand scheme of things is kind of important, and you don't even know it's actually from that
Yeah, I
film
did
unless
you
you're watching the credits.
did you
It's the
figure it out?
USB drive in the
That
cement mixer.
I kind of thought that could be it, but I just wasn't sure.
It definitely is
At the end of
because
it, I was
it
like, yeah, that's
says
the only one that could say like, yeah, undisclosed location.
yeah.
But
And in the credits, it says undisclosed location from Citizen 4, blah, 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 blah. But other than that, I mean, there's very minimal footage here that was not meant for something else, and that is the personal stuff that involves her and her mother and her
family,
kids
yeah.
and yeah, all the family stuff. But it makes me want to kind of watch some more of her work, just because as a filmmaker, as a camera person, she clearly has a really brilliant voice. I like her usage of reflection. You get like 2 or 3 different shots where that happens. Her landscapes on the whole, and just the way that she's able to document people of foreign lands, and it kind of paints this tableau. And it made me feel actually really shitty as a person, because most of the subjects here are, in countries that are briefly thereafter some kind of turmoil, whether it be
especially the Bosnian War.
yeah, like it's either like a civil war or a full-on war, or people that have been victims of rape or unplanned pregnancy, or
That's
all
really
these.
a commonality here. Is just, I mean, the best thing I could get out of this was that this is kind of a meditation of sort of pain and death. Like, there's this montage where, it fits with either some of the subjects that you saw beforehand, but then you get stuff like, you see the site of the World Trade Center, and like you see,
Oh yeah, you get that real depressing montage.
yeah,
in the
Wounded Knee Creek,
beginning of the
like
third
yeah,
act.
which is like just this stuff where horrible things happen, but you're seeing these very nice peaceful
Yeah.
environments. But it's like that's the entirety of what this movie is doing, is like it's almost like it's trying to find the beauty in that to give it some sort of meaning, to see like
No, I
what
think
goes
it
on.
definitely finds the beauty in all of the moments. Whether
Like the
it
only
be,
thing that stains it is when you get those captions saying like, "Oh, this is where the World Trade Centers were."
That's what made me feel shitty though, because you're looking at these people that, especially in the Bosnian footage, which is like 50 to 60% of what you see on screen, where it's these
Clearly
people,
had an impact on her, especially
yeah,
when she's saying like, "Hey, I came back because I had good
the
memories here."
blueberries. But yeah, you see these peasants who are survivors of like a culture that was basically banished from a foreign land, and I'm sitting here, watching it on my flat screen TV from my PlayStation that I'm streaming through my Amazon account that I pay $100 for a month, or I mean a year, and I'm not
What the fuck have
exactly.
you been through, right?
It's not even just that. It's just like I'm not exactly the most materialistic person, but at the same time, it made me second guess some of the ways that I spend my money. Just in regards to, like I said, the manner in which I did my screening. It's no lesser if I went to art house cinema or I went to Sundance and I watched this in a theater. I mean, in some respects, that's actually worse. I don't know. I haven't really seen many films like this one. I think it's not just because I haven't seen many documentaries, and once again, I hesitate to use that descriptor here.
What's really interesting here, though, is that documentaries, typically the filmmakers for those movies, they are flies in the wall. But this one,
Well,
are like
depends
that's
on the
kind of
mode.
what they're supposed to be. Is they're supposed to
No,
focus on
no,
their
no.
subject, and they're supposed to have an objective eye. And
Not
even
true.
here, well,
Not true.
most of the time, like
There's
they have a
there's
subject
7
that they
different
follow.
modes of documentary film.
The point is, though, here you're standing alongside the camera person, the titular camera person, the whole time, and rather than just focusing on the subject that they're trying to acquire, you're definitely getting their point of view, which usually can be silent for the most part in documentaries.
I think it's more so that documentaries that the crossover that the mainstream public is mostly aware of fall into that mode, the the observation mode. But look at, I mean, Michael Moore is featured here from Fahrenheit 9/11. Every one of his films, he's the main star. It's about him and his journey. Same goes for Kirby Dick in This Film Is Not Yet Rated. Citizen 4, like Laura Petra plays like a large role. There's countless other examples. If you look at like to a lesser extent, but even Hoop Dreams, like anytime you hear the filmmaker's voice on screen, and that's a
Hoop Dreams
it's
especially
purposeful.
though, that is a thing where, hey, if their power goes out, what do
Yeah.
the filmmakers do? They just stand there and be like, well, good luck. They barely invade usually. Like even here, there is a moment where I was literally thinking of just that concept of the fly on the wall, where she's watching the toddler in Bosnia just playing with the axe, but you can hear her. She kept the audio in where she's just going like, "Oh, geez," like just expecting something bad to happen. Which it's like that instinct of like, okay, you're a filmmaker, you're a documentarian, you're supposed to capture it and just pretend to be invisible, but like, where does that ethical line just lie there? Like I was definitely thinking that, like, no, I would forgive you if you invaded this and just stop the kid from playing with that for a second, because something horrible could have happened, like
This isn't a documentary, though.
it's interesting though, like it
It's
is a
it's
memoir, but
it's
I
a
was
memoir.
thinking,
Like
yeah,
it's
knowing that
titled.
that's usually kind of the aim, is to capture some in real life and try not to be intrusive on it, but I don't know, for some like that too, it's like
Well, see, that's the thing, though.
That
Like,
moment I
if
found
you take
amusing.
even acclaimed and historic documentaries like the Bob Dylan one, Don't Look Back, that whole thing is fabricated. They literally set up situations beforehand and film them to make it more entertaining than it actually was. Like, there's a conflict that happens there in the middle of the film between Bob Dylan and what's his name? Like, I think he's part of the Monkees. Totally fabricated. Like, they were good friends. They just wanted something exciting on camera, and that.
There's
That's
that
like
question too of whether what you're getting is truly authentic when it comes to documentaries, and anyone can sell something like that as like, oh, this is fact, like this really happened, like and then there's things that subvert that. It's a messy thing. Like, how do you know what's necessarily truly happening? Which here I can definitely believe it, because it's a personal memoir of someone that's there in the middle of everything, and they're sharing that experience.
I think it's more so just how it blends the real footage from her life, not just in terms of what she was paid to film, but her in between moments in New York. Like, even when, like you said, when she's talking, that first, it's the second thing you actually see. You get like a soft open, and then you get the title. And when you get that postcard shot of, I think was it
Missouri, I
Nebraska,
think,
Missouri, or something
yeah.
like that, and you get the lightning, and you hear like exclaim like, "Oh my God!" and then you hear like coughing and sneezing, which was left in intentionally. It's because I'm the camera person. I'm not the person that makes the movie. I'm the person that facilitates that story going on screen, and it's in conjunction with the kind of content that is shown here, and also the idea that this is someone behind the lines, the person who's usually just a passive observer, someone who gets none of the limelight, whose name isn't even known, someone's name that, in this case, you actually forgot until I reminded you.
It's KJ, right? Or
Yeah,
KT?
it's Kristen Johnson.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to documentaries, when it's a very small crew, if there's a crew at all, the camera person is probably the most important. And then even in narrative films, when you look at Hollywood productions, the cinematographer is one of the most important people, and they also almost usually anyway don't have a name. And like part of that, you can blame the Cahiers du Cinema, like that's part of the auteur theory, like no one matters except the director.
Everyone's got their own touch that's vital. It's just the director gets the credit for everything. Like, I mean, in this case, because we're talking about a camera person, yes, like, their work is very much important in that they control what ends up being on the screen. But I mean, I think as a general rule, like, everyone has a responsibility in getting their own little touch in there. It's not just what the camera person captures for narrative. It's the person that designs the sets, or hey, even for actors, it might be that little thing that they do. It's always a thing that everyone works towards, and they have different responsibilities.
Just with this one in particular, though, I mean, there's a list of producers, but they don't matter because how do you really produce a film that was already filmed in the first place? Like they didn't have to get travel visas or anything for this. Well, I would
No.
assume not, outside of like maybe The Return to Bosnia. Maybe that was
Well, the
filmed
credits
just for
are
this or something.
pretty short for this, right? Like I didn't sit through
Yeah,
the whole
you-
thing, but they just list mostly the other films for it.
No, I'm talking about even the opening credits. Like you get a list of a couple people. There's a Disney, which I would assume is the same Disney family.
Oh, they
don't
they
remember.
produced it as in they were able to get it out there and distributed, I guess.
Maybe, but
Yeah.
like then again,
I mean, this
in
has
what
to be released
sense?
through some production company too,
In the sense of, in what way though? This was a Sundance film. It premiered right away. Janice wanted it, and then it was put out by Criterion. Like this doesn't scream it needed any kind of line producer. That it kind of was done by the own merits of the work that Kristen Johnson had done
there's
before
also-
this and during, and
it
like she was
isn't
already
just
known
the
in those
footage.
circles.
There's some obvious post production work here. I'm sure like the editing's the easy part, but there is obviously some sound work being put in here.
But
I mean,
it's,
that
it's
sound
like-
of the lightning strike. I doubt that's the real one. Like
I think that's the real one.
I have a good set of headphones. Like, you could tell that, like, especially the beginning when they have all that herd of sheep. Like,
Oh, that was fake.
yeah, like there's definitely
Yeah.
sounds that are being added in there. So there's things that are added to enhance it after the fact. There's
I mean,
still
also
some
there's
post work that's being done here. It can't
There's
be a
lower
big crew.
third titles every once in a while, especially
Yeah.
for foreign languages. and
Someone's
stuff.
got to type up the subtitles. There's still people doing some decent amount of work in post
It's like,
production.
actually, let me check real fast, because with a film like this, because it's so personal, I would assume that Kristen Johnson did it all. That she clearly filmed everything. She's
I would assume
the
that
director.
she edited it, but did she have the patience to type up all the subtitles and everything like that? Like
Well, not that.
I'm
Like,
sure
I don't
that,
think
like,
she
there's-
did. Yeah, everything. That's what an intern's for.
yeah, there might be some interns that were able to like help compress the footage into one file so that it all evened out, because there's different formats to play with here. There's
No, there's two
she
two editors here.
yeah, there might be. She might have taken them all the footage to an editing house to get it all combined so that it could fit in one place. Who knows? Maybe an interview would be nice to figure out all this stuff and how it all came together.
Apparently, this was initially released in 2008 in a very limited run, and then 8 years later, it went into Sundance. Has that ever happened? Like,
Well,
what the
there had to have
fuck?
been stuff added to it, because you're talking about the stuff from Citizen 4 that's being added there, and there's other things in the filmography. So I guess it's a developing project before release, Like,
That's really curious, though. Now that I
even
see that,
there's the stuff with the bird. The only reason I know that was shot post 2013 is
yeah,
because
our
the
kids
girl
are
had a
way
Frozen
older.
shirt.
This is one of those movies where it's not quite a movie. It's kind of its own thing. If you're not into either if you're not into documentary films or more artsy things, this is a Criterion release,
Yeah.
then you're probably not going to like it. And that goes hand in hand with the critical praise it has, because it has something ridiculous like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, 86 on Metacritic. I think got a standing ovation at Sundance this past year. And, it's good, and it's amazing that it's on Prime, because there really aren't many other films like this. It's the first time I've seen something really like this, maybe ever. And it feels like a memoir. Like, this feels like almost like she was carrying a diary with her when she was filming these various subjects around the world, and you're finally getting to read about it. You get to see these dark moments about suicide and depression, about rape, and how hard it is to be an independent black woman in Chicago when you have your second kid on the way.
Alabama.
Was that Alabama?
I'm pretty sure. Well, sorry,
No,
I don't
I
mean
think-
to ruin
pretty
your
sure,
point.
Pretty sure
it's-
it's Chicago. It's like you don't see this kind of thing often. I think
No.
that's kind of why it got the acclaim it did, because I didn't take much away. It made me think. This is the kind of movie where you're watching this and you leave
Yeah.
the theater and you get a coffee afterwards and you kind of talk about the movie, except you're not talking about the movie. You're more talking about your reaction to it and kind of like what you're going to try to, I'm going to become a better person now. I'm going to donate to charity type
that's
of thing.
what that's truly what art is, in this sense. Like, I definitely saw it more as like a meditation of just like pain and I mean, because there's focus on the woman in Alabama or Chicago that's struggling to take care of an incoming second kid, and then I mean, there's definitely the difficulties of difficult experiences of women is definitely a common thing here. You know, they talk about rape in the Bosnian War. There's also, you know, there's that montage of everything that happens. They included this conversation, which is probably the best behind the scenes bit that you get about just how you're kind of trying to take in all this pain as a documentarian, and you have to bring it out in the world, but you know, it still in some way makes an impression on you if you have not experienced their physical pain. You're having it being told to you, and you're right there, and you're hearing somebody else's story. You know, like, and they're just
You talking about
and
the
how
Serbian driver in the hotel?
yeah, like, and they're just having this conversation in, like, this restaurant, and just like how emotionally taxing it still is, but you know, they still feel an obligation to do it. You know, like, that's the main takeaway that I got from it here, is that, like, yeah. And then, you know, there's this it wasn't Jacques Derrida that did it. It was later in the film. There's this conversation in a classroom where a professor is talking about
Yeah, the
ju-
talking
just
about the depiction of footage of different countries and what the kind of response that has in the media, and how
but also just
it's
like the
something.
responsibility of how to look at death and
It's
suffering.
it's
And
something that I share too. He had a great line where he's like, you know, if you pass a dead person on the street, you're gonna cover their face, you're gonna close their eyes, and yet the media, it's gonna portray that image and throw it on a big screen. Like, look at the you know, the late night news, or better yet, a newspaper. Like, pain and suffering gets the front page. It is the headline. That's the thing that people care about. Like, partially that's because it's fear mongering, and also they know people are going to be, it's not just the fear mongering, but also it's the thing that makes a big impact. Like, a death is important, even if you've never met the person. Like, you're going to have some kind of reaction, even if you've never, you know, had someone in your family die or anything. Like the bird, I think the bird here is like a great metaphor for that. How these kids mostly whimsical about the situation. Oh, there's a dead bird, look, oh, we need a shovel, let's get rid of it, you know. And at the same time, it's kind of like this, it undercuts everything, because her kids, her twins, you know, that they're like maybe 5, 6 perhaps, and they don't, maybe she shares some of her adventures, you know, but they don't know anything about the pain and suffering their mom has experienced over the last 20-25 years. And it's like really illuminating how you can, like, what it must be like being the daughter of someone with Alzheimer's, you know,
yeah,
who just passed away.
that's the one time you
And
see her face too.
yeah, you're also you're making there's footage of you making a documentary with a director who the subject, her mom, just committed suicide. Like, you have this very dark, dark, dark shit. At the same time, you get, yeah, like, these real beautiful shots. Like, for instance, not, it's not Nigeria. That's where the nursery is.
Although even that moment, like the way that it's chosen with the baby, of how, like, you know, something could potentially happen here, but you could still, you know, there's still a good outcome to that happens.
Some of the more strikingly visual stuff for me, though, was in Darfur, when you have that kid like chanting, and then you have the two women chopping down the tree.
And they're deciding how to frame that
Yeah,
shot
it's
too.
like
Yeah.
you get that little kind of inside look behind the scenes into, yeah, like, a documentary isn't just by happenstance. Like, you frame it, you are making your story. As someone who has edited a documentary, you fuck with shit. Like, you can easily make a conversation appear like it's natural when it never happened in the first place. You could take dialogue from day 1 and day 5 and just mesh it together. I'm not saying I necessarily did that, but when you're
You
doing,
might have even heard something like that on this podcast.
yeah, like, when you're doing cutaways and stuff, like, you really have free reign as a filmmaker, and the idea of the documentary is kind of bullshit. And I think there's a portion of that is present here in the way that it just jumps between one subject or one shoot from the next. How there's not exactly a framing structure, but, like, you open with the boxing match, a lot later you get the boxing match. Like, you get certain things that you kind of forget about until they show up again, which is done fairly well for something of this runtime. It's like 145 minutes, 140 minutes, something like that. And it did test my attention span a little bit, but at the same time, like, I don't regret watching it. I knew immediately when I saw that Criterion logo, and it like stuck with me. I was thinking to myself, yep, this is a Criterion movie. For sure. Like, the average film goer is not going to watch this or even want to watch this. This
absolutely
is a very dark, very deep kind of philosophical wandering into someone who has recorded very just some of the worst things about humanity, especially when it comes to, you know, the Snowden stuff and Citizen 4. It's like to be present in the room in these kind of situations to kind of chronicle just some of the just worst shit that's happened over the last decade or two. It makes sense why there's so much here that isn't exactly lighthearted, except when there are these jokes sprinkled throughout, or you hear people laughing. It's like anything is possible. Like, it's kind of beautiful.
Everyone, there's awful shit that happens, but it's always at different levels. You know, watching your parent go away with Alzheimer's is not easy, but I wouldn't necessarily equate that to the Bosnian War at all, because those are two different levels. But there's still forms of pain and of human suffering in some way. But I mean, really, just the main thing that you get to the final point of here that's so beautiful is that even with all the shit that just goes down, you can still come away with something that seems worth it. You know, even especially at the end when you get to the stuff in Bosnia where it's like, you know what, I have good memories here despite hearing all these awful things. And you know, we're still, just as people, we can horrible things can happen, and yet we can still find the beauty in it, and just being with one another or enjoying a certain place or whatever it is that happens. You know, it's like bad things are, in my experience, they're more likely to happen than the good, but you remember the good, and that's the stuff that makes it worth it to keep going. Otherwise, if it was just constant utter shit, then I don't know why we wouldn't have killed ourselves at some point.
Well, some of us do, but
Yeah.
I can't buy this one. I mean, I don't regret watching it. Like, it's an interesting meditative experience. It's an interesting look into the kind of trials and tribulations of being a documentarian, or better yet, a camera person. But I don't know. It's like, maybe it's because of the editing, how just scatterbrained it is, and how many different slices of life you're kind of just admitted to. Whereas, you know, this is taking footage from like roughly like 12 documentaries. If you're watching any one of those 12, you're like, okay, like, I'm getting to know these characters, these settings. Oh, this is what's going on, and you still get those exact same things here in this package, and it's almost like it's not necessarily overkill, but it does really test not just your patience, but it makes you question your humanity a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And
You definitely take time to think about what you're seeing and how you can relate to that.
To a certain extent, it does it a little too far for me. Like, this didn't just get thrown together on accident. Like, they were intentionally looking for certain things from different shots, from different shoots, to make you feel a certain way. Like, it's a little too manipulative for me. Like, it's aware of the kind of stuff that it's showing. It wants you to feel a certain way, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I think it's just mainly whose perspective you're getting on this.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you've talked about, documentaries being easy to manipulate. It's
big time,
and it's true. You know, it, like, just the concept of editing is manipulation itself.
It's
something
beyond that with when you're making a documentary too.
The thing is, though, like with this, though, it's not at all an objective eye, but I do think someone is at least, they're able to project what their experience was with it, the truth that they saw in it, and in this case, definitely the emotions that were felt within that. So, I mean, that is possible. I don't know if I'd call it manipulative. I would say that I could see what it is that they were seeing and what they wanted me to see, but I believe, because of their comments behind the camera, that that's what they were seeing. So it's not like I felt like there was some sort of false just emotion that was being forced into me that seemed disingenuous.
Well, let's just use, for instance, the gay bashing segment from Jasper, which seems like that's exactly what happened. You got this guy that's dragged behind this truck. He goes into grave detail into what happened. You get that shot of the chain being removed from the box and them dragging it out. You get the close-up of that. We'll see if we can release these photos. We didn't have to show the photos in the courtroom. They were that bad. You get all that, and yet you lack any of the substance of what actually happened. That story is gone. And yet, in this very condensed nature, even though it's sprinkled across this long memoir, you're pretty aware of what happened. Like it's not a mystery. You get that the shot of the pickup truck as part of the montage with
Yeah.
the where the towers fell on September 11th, or the hotel in Liberia, or like this swimming
Rwanda,
pool.
Wounded Creek,
Yeah, like
which,
all
no one could have captured that because there weren't even moving pictures then.
yeah, Wounded Knee, not Creek.
So
Yeah,
isn't it
like
Wounded Knee Creek, or
I don't know. It's
my
Wounded Knee
history
though.
is really
And
dodgy there?
yeah, it's trying to elicit a certain emotion. It kind of does, but then just as like I said, someone who has made not a film of this nature but of this genre, I was aware for what they were doing. Like it didn't come off the cuff. Like it didn't seem natural. Like it was not forced, but pretty much. Like I was happy to be transported to these places with these people to experience these things, to get some kind of insight into the people that maybe survived atrocious parts of humanity. And then I was also thinking like, but what's it really trying to say? Like it made me want to have a conversation about it, a conversation that we're having. And at the same time, I'm not exactly vocal about it because we don't talk about art cinema on our shows, but it's the reason why I'm not a fan of art cinema. Like maybe we'll watch one, like a true one, like a Eraserhead one of these days. But generally when I feel like there aren't actually answers, or not answers, but when a film raises questions without answering it themselves and they just want you to be inward looking, I don't necessarily have a problem with the film, but I feel like it does that not necessarily because it intended to. In this case, yes, it definitely meant to do that. But when it's a narrative feature, to me, it feels like lazy script writing or lazy filmmaking.
It can. It's weird because it's part of the reason of like there's reasons why I love Terrence Malick's movies for some reason, but then there's also reasons why I wasn't that big on Knight of Cups. So
Oh yeah, we did Knight of Cups.
in the case of narratives, it's really a weird thing, and it truly is that thing where it's in the eye of the beholder. But as the beholder, it could really sink in with you, and it might not with other people, and yeah, that's why you have conversations on it because you can tend to disagree. I doubt, like I'm sure someone might have a similar experience that I had on this, but I doubt it's always going to echo the same thing. But it's not because it's a documentary, and usually just I find it weird to rate things like that. That either they're dealing with something that's very serious and important, and they're capturing some reality in there, but I mean, I refuse to give this a rating of any kind because this posits itself as a memoir right off the bat, and it totally is that. And, the idea of rating someone's diary or even probably what this is close to I would liken it to a photo album in some way, someone looking at different points of their life and finding a way to connect some ideas there and their experiences and what they're thinking. But like, or a mixtape, just to rate that is stupid to me. But I could definitely say like I found value in this experience. I found value in seeing it. It's not like I'm gonna be compelled to rewatch it, but the fact that someone took without any intent to begin with, had all these things and all their experiences in their life, both professional by going out and making documentaries on some serious subjects, and also the more intimate stuff that's within their family, and sharing that, you do get a sense of at least what this person's story has been for the past 25 years, what she wants to share, and just common things that have been on her mind that based on what she's experienced or heard, literally, or just seen right off the bat. It's there's definitely value in that, and that you see a lot of the world, and it's it is kind of like not. Well, because the social scenes I've had, literally, the best I can equate it to is going to a bar and having someone tell you their story. This might be a version of that, where you get to see the slides that they bring with you. Of course, though, I doubt I'd be told this story at a bar, but that's my social scene. But you get what I'm saying, is like, it's kind of like a film version of that, where someone is painting themselves and presenting it for you. It's not like a documentarian seeking a subject and trying to present somebody else, really. So that's really the best I could say, is like, yeah, I definitely recommend it if you're game for giving this a chance, but I cannot give this a rating just because it would feel wrong to me.
I can't recommend this one. I think this is one of those movies where if you have any kind of interest in it or you discover it on your own, like we did in our, like
Like this is the
conversation about the F
conversation
rating.
I would have for it. It's probably the only one, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to tell my closest friends to see it because I know they're going to just
If we didn't
not be on
have
board
that
with it.
conversation about the F rating, probably both of us wouldn't have discovered this. It flew under the radar. Maybe got these good reviews, but
I saw the Criterion announcement. That's about it. But
yes,
there's
I didn't
very
even know that. It's
few things that would have motivated me to seek this out on my own. And if it wasn't this podcast as an avenue, I got to be honest, I probably wouldn't have.
yeah, I probably wouldn't have seen it either.
I mean,
And
this is worth seeing for the conversation mostly.
maybe, yeah. Like if you see this with someone, you're undoubtedly gonna talk about it in like the book club sense of the word.
Mhm.
But it's gonna make you feel bad about your life, or just about life in general, for the most part. And it's not a waste
Again,
of time.
depends
but
on how you view life. I mean, I didn't feel guilty,
I felt
fortunate
I
for
felt
sure.
guilty
but
in some ways. I felt fortunate too, but I don't know. It's just like to think about it. It's like I spent an hour and a half watching this. And I don't regret that use of time, but I could have done something that made me feel happy about life. To like bring this back to the last documentary I watched, Ketty. Like I was very discussive, or I'm not discussive. Like I talked about it in pretty good detail on our last episode of 2 Cents, episode 88, which has a great title, by the way, and. That's the kind of documentary where you watch it and you're like, oh man, like you learn about these other people in a foreign land just like this, except it is a documentary. Like it's made with a certain intention. It wants the viewer to feel a certain way. And it also is manipulative because it is a very happy film. Like it wants you to feel joy. It's just the difference is that it feels natural almost. Like like you're lucky enough to be on the voyage, whereas this one is it's a Criterion release for a reason. Like they generally speaking only pick certain things, and it kind of wears that on its sleeve. Like it almost seems like Criterion gave Kristen Johnson money to make this so they could include it in their collection. It seems like one of those kinds of things, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to see it because there are a lot of people out there that watch everything that's part of the collection.
Oh yeah, they follow it like concert bands on their
Yeah.
tour.
So-
I used to be one of those people.
I'm sure the majority of people that even listen to the episode are probably those kind of people. And
We love you too, guys.
yeah, I'm very proud to say I only have 3 Criterion releases, and
I've
they're
got
all
like 20.
by filmmakers that make quote unquote cult slash populist type films for the most part.
I've got like 20, but that includes the 2 from Michael Bay. So
Technically, this is the first episode post Penny Thoughts being on the show. I doubt you've seen anything or read anything the last 24 hours, but you could have. Did you? Did you explore anything since we did 2 Cents last night?
no, not at all.
I did. I was bored and I was like doing research on Father of the Bride, and I found
You
that
watched the sequel, didn't you?
yeah, they made a sequel called Father's Little Dividend, which came out a year after. It came out in '51.
How'd you get it? Because
It's
in
part
public
of public
domain.
domain, yeah.
but
So
was it
I
on
watched
YouTube,
it
or-
on archive.org. I watched half of it because I fell asleep, but it's short, just like the first one. It's 80 minutes, and what's funny about that is, Father of the Bride, as we talk about, clearly has a remake with Steve Martin. It's pretty much a clean cut like remake. It was such a success that 3 years later they made a sequel. I thought they made a sequel just because. Nope, that is a sequel to a remake. I mean, it's a remake sequel, which I didn't know that they made. So yeah, Father's Little Dividend was mostly remade as Father of the Bride Part 2. It took creative liberty. They added some extra things. What I saw of the sequel, though, was pretty cool. Like it was much better than the first one. Uses a lot of the same stuff. It's mostly Spencer Tracy talking, like narration. It's about him still. Everyone else is just playing around him, but it has all of the same cast. Matter of fact, I did a little bit of research. According to Leonard Maltin, it was like one of the first real major studio sequels. So they must have had everyone on a contract still. They probably entered production like shortly after the Oscars wrapped up. I'll probably finish watching it tonight. Like, I already know where the story's going. You know, I've seen the remake, but at the same time, it's a good time. Like it's just as enjoyable as the original is. I actually like I didn't like laugh, but I definitely had more grins on my face than watching the actual Father of the Bride. Good title too, Father's Little Dividend. Like that's a good title. It's kind of forced when you're watching it. Like it's like, oh, they knew what the title was beforehand. They put that line of dialogue in the movie. But all the things that I liked, even though I wasn't that glowing about it in the first place, are all there. Like Elizabeth Taylor's still really gorgeous and captivating, and there's some good, interesting like shots that happen, and just the fact that you already know all of these characters and you've kind of lived with them for a while, you're like, oh yeah, this is why sequels are made. Like it was likable, people enjoyed it, and I think the real takeaway, and this is a thing that I kind of borrowed from a conversation that we had with Brennan when he guested on our Black Christmas episode of Debt to Cinema, where I was like, I don't know if this one counts as a horror film because I wasn't scared. Father the Bride, just because it's a comedy doesn't mean it's funny. I think that's true for the genre. Like it means it's comedic. Like it's not a dramatic film or film series for that matter. But that doesn't mean that it has to make you laugh. Like you go into a
No,
comedy.
like there's stuff in that movie that I'm sure people could have related to at that time, especially.
No, even still, I think it's still relatable. It's just it is undoubtedly a comedy. Like there's nothing serious about it. Maybe the nightmare sequence, but there's nothing serious. Like there's even like when they break up or whatever. Like in the moments where it gets like a little bit more like tearjerkery,
Uh-huh.
it's gonna be a good time. Like it's a comedy, and like also like in Stranger Than you've seen Stranger Than Fiction, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so you get that line from Dustin Hoffman. He's like, if it's a comedy, they get married. If it's a tragedy, he dies. And that's true. Like in 1950, I'm sure there was countless melodramatic films. I think like
Still, it's not so much about
Imitation of Life is that year,
genre
I think.
for me though. It's more or less like whether story is really that compelling. And for that movie,
It isn't.
I don't know.
but
Maybe it's something like This Is 40, where maybe I got to be older to really connect with it. But I was just like, okay, it's she's
No, I don't
getting
think
married
so.
and it's a wedding
No,
and he's stressing out and you see them going through the motions and then that's that. And it's good and it's entertaining, but it's still it still didn't do much for me.
no, it didn't do much for me either. But I don't know. I was
Like
kind
it's
of
not like it's without merit though.
I was reflecting a fair amount. But it's just in terms of filmmaking, it's pretty interesting. Like they got the same director, they got the same cast, they got everyone.
They did it less than a year later, right? It's
Yeah,
the
it-
same
it
effect
came
as
out a year
King
later.
Kong and Son of Kong.
Perhaps. I mean, I haven't seen those, but just
They both came out in 1933. Son of Kong just
that's
they
RKO
sped that
though.
into production.
That's RKO, and it's
And
a
that's like
creature
20
feature.
years earlier, so
It's a much
More of a
smaller
studio system.
studio, and it's a much different movie. There isn't like besides Fay Ray, who wasn't ever like an actual star. There isn't a star in those King Kong movies. Whereas here, you got Elizabeth Taylor, Joan Bennett, you got Spencer Tracy, plus you also have a acclaimed director. Like it's a much bigger deal, especially in that era of filmmaking. That like I said, I feel like even though the debt that I paid off was for Father of the Bride, I feel like I still owe that debt for the sequel, and I'll finish watching that. The better thing that I did today, though, I was reading an interview in Game Informer a couple hours ago, and it's with Ken Loeb, whose name I'd never heard of, but you might be familiar. You played the Golden
Loeb?
No, Loeb. You played GoldenEye growing up, right?
yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar with the gun, the Klob?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's named after this guy. And he has a really interesting career. He basically got in, like he was just a big on video games when they came out. Like when he was in high school is when Space Invaders was released. And by just sheer luck, he went from being like a computer programmer to working for like a small studio that doesn't exist anymore, then Namco, then Nintendo. He worked with Rare across like all of their popular games, including Killer Instinct and GoldenEye and Donkey Kong Country. And then he went to Microsoft. And then when he was at Microsoft, he was there shortly before Rare was bought by them. So he still works with them. Sounds awesome though. Just reading basically his life story, or at least the story of his career in an interview, like a 4-page interview, was really cool. It's like kind of like the kind of it's It's more custom to something more like Rolling Stone is when you get a thing like that. But it's not the first time I've read one of these in Game Informer. Really great coverage, really interesting career. It'd be awesome if you got a memoir or something, like if they decided to make video game movies in that way. Because there are a couple of documentaries, and then like Seth Rogen,
King of Kong.
King of Kong too, but Seth Rogen's making a comedy about like the
Oh, I thought
video
it
game
was
in
Seth
boom.
Gordon. Sorry.
He's making a comedy about the boom. So maybe that would work, because like just video game development in general is something that's untapped in the media. It would work for, like web development is becoming a thing, especially like Silicon Valley on HBO. But it's, people get tired of watching movies because it's stories that we've seen before. Like there's a lot more that can be out there, and like reading this interview, like I said, was really fascinating. Thanks for listening. We hope it's been a pleasure. If you like this show and you want to hear more of our wonderful voices on a weekly basis, check out 2 Cents. I'll recap what's happened in film, TV, and tech news.
We're also on Debt to Cinema, where one or both of us crosses a title off our list of shame.
You can find all of our content at dollarreviews.net. Follow us on Twitter or like us on Facebook at Dollar Reviews.
We're available on iTunes, YouTube, TuneIn, Stitcher, and constantly looking to expand to other platforms.
If you listen somewhere we're currently not available, you'd like to contribute some talking points, send a Debt to Cinema request, or even if you just want to laugh at us, you can do so by reaching out to us on social media or send an email to brian@dollarreviews.net.
Or you can email me as well, steve@dollarreviews.net.
You can follow me personally on Twitter at Brian Gillis, that's BryonGillis, and now you know how to spell the email too, and also under the same name on the lovely site Letterboxd, which acts as my film diary, where I rate films that I'm watching, write the occasional review, and even sometimes compile lists.
You can also find me on Twitter at S_MTX, and also follow my film diary at Letterboxd under the same name, where I log everything I watch, and sometimes write brief reviews.
That's it for this week. Until next time, keep the change.